Let's wait for the humans to come in. Welcome to Channel 9. Let us know when you're here. Hello. Greetings, Liz. Greetings, Calvin. Tonight, we are here to bring some tales of horror to you. On our new channel, what is premiering tonight as part of Eaton, which is presented by PBDC TV. So join me for some tales of some horrifying first-person accounts. I think you'll like these, especially if you like the creepypasta. So we'll go ahead and get started. So this was submitted November 10th, 2015. Submission was by Cream, called Logical Explanation. I woke that night to Echo, my dog, barking up a storm. He was perched on the edge of my bed, facing the door and yapping away like crazy. I scratched him behind the ear to get him to calm down and guide him to his usual spot on my bed. In hindsight, him barking was the first warning. My brain, overactive as it is, was curious as to why he was behaving so oddly. Echo rarely barked at anything, so it was unlikely he was barking at nothing. Perhaps this is a skunk in the yard, I thought to myself, seeing as how I was halfway asleep at the time. That explanation seemed perfectly logical. Had I been more aware, I would have realized that any skunks in the neighborhood would be weeks into their hibernation this time of year. Even if they weren't, the vicious snowstorm outside would deter them from wandering about. I attempted to fall asleep after that, and how I wish I did. Unfortunately, due to my habit of sleeping with my mouth open, I was becoming increasingly aware of how thirsty I was. I tried to stay warm in the warmth of my bed for as long as possible, but it wasn't long before my tongue felt like sandpaper. It was clear to me that I wouldn't be able to sleep without a glass of water. I told Echo to stay and slipped into my moccasins. The air outside my nest of blankets was freezing, so I put on my housecoat as well. When I left my bedroom, I noticed that the basement television was showing static. Mother probably forgot to turn it off after watching her murder mysteries, I thought. The TV's playing static because of the storm outside. It's just messing with our cable. Another logical explanation, which would be far less logical if I were to fully be awake. My mother, no matter how tired she was, would never leave the television on. She's far too meticulous to do something like that. In my sleepy brain, however, it made perfect sense. I couldn't find the TV remote as the room was dark and I didn't want to accidentally blind myself by turning on the lights. So I left the TV on. I should have turned back, crawled back into bed, and waited for morning. I climbed the stairs to the landing, which was bathed in an orange glow, cast by the streetlights reflecting off the clouds above. From up here, I could hear the wind battering itself against the house's walls. I was startled to wake up a little bit. I noticed that the deadbolt on the door was unlocked. This was my final warning. My parents felt that it wasn't necessary, what with the storm and all. The seeds of doubt began to form in my mind. I knew that it wasn't the case. Some new neighbors have been suspected of breaking into people's houses and stealing their liquor. My parents, being collectors of fine wines, have made it a habit to lock the deadbolt every night for the past few months. Even when the act was completely pointless, my conscious brain was starting to wake up, starting to notice things. A feeling of unease began to pool in my gut. Still, after locking the deadbolt, I continued to the kitchen. From the kitchen, I had a clear view of the living room, and while I filled an empty glass with water from the sink, I not only noticed that the television up here was also showing static, but that there was a figure also seated on the couch. Don't worry, I thought nervously. That's just Dad. He's been sleepwalking again. This time, I was fully aware of the flaws in the logical explanation. The fact that the figure on the couch was bald and plump, while my father is lean. His hair is only beginning to thin. The fact that my father has been taking medication to prevent his sleepwalking as well. The fact that I could hear him snoring from my parents' bedroom. I tried to disregard these thoughts, to push them to the back of my mind, like I had done before. This time, it didn't work. I gently set my glass on the kitchen counter. My hands were cold and clammy, shaking in terror. My heart rate was increasing, and my breath was rapid. Even in the confusion of the moment, I knew that this wasn't some regular burglar. I doubted that the thing on the couch was even human. I reached for the phone to call 911, only to find that it couldn't get any service due to the storm. Frustrated and confused, I started randomly pushing buttons on the keypad. That's when I heard the thing move. The sound wasn't loud, but it was enough to make my blood run cold and sent clammy sweat down my back. It was the sound of bones popping, not just a few either. It sounded like an entire room full of people cracking their necks, backs, and knuckles all at once. I turned from the useless phone to look at the creature for the first time. It was now standing, facing me and illuminated by the orange glow from the living room's window. It stood at about 6 feet tall and was completely naked, and was rather plump. Its skin was a shallow grayish color and looked almost slimy. The creature's arms dangled as if they were boneless, and at the end of each was a gnarled mess of fingers. The worst part about the creature, however, was its face. The thing had no nose, only two slits where its nostrils would be. Its eyes were hollow, white orbs that seemed too large for the rest of its face. As for its mouth, well, it didn't really have one. It looked as if the entire lower jaw had been knocked clean off the rest of its face, leaving a swollen pink tongue hanging against its neck. The creature started walking towards me, making that awful sound with each step. It looked like it was trying to speak to me, but without its jaw, the tongue could only wiggle around helplessly as the sinister moans escaped its throat. I did what anybody else would do in that situation, and I ran like hell. When I got to the landing, I closed the door between the landing and the first floor. I had three options. I could surrender myself to the creature. I could run downstairs, which would eventually lead to a dead end, or I could run outside and face one of the worst blizzards of the decade. None of my choices were desirable, but I knew that I'd be dead anyway if I kept standing there. I didn't get much time to choose, though, as the door between me and the creature swung open, revealing that thing in all its grotesque glory. It began to descend the stairs towards me. I made my decision, and as stupid as it was, I wouldn't be alive if I hadn't done it. I unlocked the deadbolt and ran outside. For the first few seconds, I felt absolutely nothing save for the adrenaline and fear surging through me. Looking back at the house as I ran, I swear I could see the creature looking at me through the kitchen window. It looked almost happy. By the time my house faded into the blizzard, the cold was starting to set in. Wearing only pajamas, slippers, and a housecoat, it wasn't hard to see why. I continued running in fear that the thing would chase me, but I was starting to go numb. By the time I reached the highway, I couldn't feel my fingers. By the time I noticed the approaching headlights, I couldn't feel my toes. By the time the vehicle had stopped in front of me, everything was starting to go black. I woke several hours later to the sound of a machine beeping. At first, I thought the whole thing was a nightmare, that I was back in my bed and that my alarm clock was telling me to wake up and go to school. I began to regain consciousness and realized that I was no longer wearing my pajamas. Rather, I was wearing a hospital gown. There was a nurse standing above me checking my vitals. Apparently, a tow truck driver had found me on his way to a job. He did what anyone else would do if they found a teenager running like hell in the middle of a snowstorm at midnight and rushed me to the nearby hospital. I was admitted to the ER with severe frostbite and a moderate case of hypothermia. My parents were contacted immediately, and at first, it seemed like I was going to go back home again. That is, until the doctors asked why I was outside in my pajamas in the first place. I told them the story as I couldn't think of any excuse that sounded less crazy. As one might expect, I was shipped off to the psych ward. That is where I'm typing this now. See, the doctors can come up with any number of logical explanations. They can tell me that I was hallucinating, that I was having a nightmare, that I was overstressed. With a medical degree, one can explain any unnatural phenomenon with enough pills and prescriptions. But just because an explanation is logical doesn't mean that it's true. At first, I believed that they were saying, and at first, it all made sense. But something happened later in the day that changed that. I was reading a book in my bed, starting to come to terms with what had happened, when the TV in my room flickered to life. It was showing static. Outside the window, I could see a gray figure standing outside the hospital. Even though I was on the fourth floor, I could tell that it was looking directly at me. So I'm sure we have some comments tonight. If you're new here, please let us know. And we have Randy Davis. Wow. Yeah. We have a lot more. And then Liz says, it is bad that I am curious to hear someone attempt to talk without a jaw now. Well, come over to Channel X. I'm sure we have some deviant creature that can fulfill that need for you, Liz. All right, so let's see. Hi, Tracy. All right, so we'll get on to our next submission. This was submitted by Babylon. Let's see if we have a date real quick. Submitted October 12th of 2013. This one is titled The Rule of Seven. The Rule of Seven. The following is an account of events that took place in the late summer of 2021. I can neither confirm nor deny its validity. It was recounted to me by my brother-in-law, who disappeared in the summer of 2008. Just off Route 49 in Clay County, Alabama, there is a house. It's abandoned now, slowly rotting to dust, but in 2001, I lived there. There is one reason I left: fear. It started in July. My dog, Georgia, had died earlier that month at the age of 14. My girlfriend had left me, and I was heavily in debt. It's safe to say things were pretty shitty. But one night, things took a sudden turn for the macabre. The phone was ringing, and when I picked it up, it was my neighbor, Mr. Bronson. He said he had seen lights around my property, about a mile down a tract from his, and he wanted to check that I was okay. After giving him my reassurance that I was indeed okay, I headed outside to look for any lights. Maybe rowdy teenagers were nearby or something. I trotted through the darkness barefoot, just with my dress gown and a flashlight. Silence greeted me. Silence and a darkness. No rowdy teenagers. No mysterious lights. No, nothing. I turned around and headed back inside to sleep. The next morning, I went to check out the property. The front door had a strange symbol dabbled on it in black paint. It was two black triangles arranged to make a diamond with a gap in the middle. A line connected the two triangles' furthermost points. Underneath was a scrawled Rule of Seven in the same paint. I stared at it in disbelief. This kind of thing didn't happen around here. After calling Mr. Bronson, the cops, and anyone else I could think of, I resigned myself to scrubbing it off with a sponge and a bucket of water. Later that night, I entered my kitchen and saw something white on the table. I picked it up, cautiously. It was a sheet of plain white paper, and in the middle were the words, Rule of Seven. I swore aloud. Someone had been in my house. Someone had been in my house, and I didn't even notice. I locked all the doors, checked every room, then went to my phone. There was no dial tone, no operator, nothing, just silence. Someone must have cut the line. I was beginning to panic, and I went to my gun safe and pulled out my weapon. It was a Colt M 1911. Loaded, I flicked off the safety. I slowly stalked up the stairs to my bedroom, jumping at every shadow. I barricaded the door, locked the window, and crawled into my bed. Sleep was impossible. Every sound I heard convinced me that whatever or whoever came in earlier was still inside. I clung to my firearm and stared at my digital clock. It was 3:49 when the power went. The clock flickered off and was quickly joined by the lights. My heart turned cold when I realized the flashlight was still on the kitchen table. I edged open my door. Silence and darkness. Just more silence and darkness. I walked blindly down the stairs, weapon at the ready. The only sound was my breathing and the creaking of the floorboards beneath my feet. I reached the kitchen and grabbed my flashlight. I fumbled with the switch, and the sweet relief of light flooded the room. The kitchen door that led out to the yard was open, shaking in the wind. Even though I locked it 5 hours ago, and the keys were still in my pocket. Just in the corner of my vision, I saw something move in the shadows. Quicker than a bullet, I swung around. My eyes landed on an empty patch of wall. I stared at it intensely for what could have been hours when a sharp noise broke my concentration. I panicked, backing into the corner. Vomit was rising in my throat. I breathed deeply. It was just a dog barking in the distance. The panic began to subside. My stomach clenched, and I did throw up. Onto the cold floorboards, I dropped the flashlight and watched it roll under the kitchen counter. Putting the gun down, I dropped to the floor and felt under the kitchen counter to grab it. My hand met nothing but dusty air. I reached further down the gap, my fingers brushing something. I reached out to feel what it was. My hand was met with another, a human hand. It was cold and hairy. I pulled back in pure shock, but it grabbed me. Its sharp, long nails dug into my skin, drawing blood. I couldn't get free. Blood was pouring down my arm. I was looking at the floor. It was cold and dark. I was lying on the kitchen floor. Had the hand been real? I didn't know. Maybe it was a dream. But when I felt my arm, it was coated with dried blood. Panicked, I felt around for my gun. My fingers met its grip, and I pulled it up. I leveled it with the kitchen counter and opened fire. The gun flashed, illuminating the room, and with terror I saw blood splatter all across the walls. It had been splashed to form the same symbol and those words, Rule of 7. It was my blood. I remember now. My fingers were red and raw from scratching the symbol into the wood so many times. Rule of 7. Rule of 7. I discarded the gun, now empty, and ran for the door. The relief of the night air met me, and I bolted around the yard to my car. I jumped in and felt around in my pocket for the keys. When I pulled them out, I started the car and pulled out into the track. As I did so, just out of the corner of my eye, I saw a figure in the window of the house. I looked away and drove off into the night, eager to forget. So what do you guys think about that one? That was a pretty good one. Let's see what we've got in the comments real quick. Oh, we have a Facebook user. Hello, Facebook user. Yes, and Maud says, they're coming to take me away. Ha ha, hee hee, ho ho. And then Liz says, I just imagine the sound of wet flesh just slapping around. All right, we'll move on to the next one. This one was submitted, and this is a good one. This one was submitted, let's see, April 11th, 2013. and it was submitted by the indexer, original author Adam G. This one is titled Body Bag. The following are diary entries taken from a leather-bound notebook that was recovered from an abandoned house awaiting demolition. June 6, 1984. Maybe I'm being paranoid. I don't know. I'm just going to write these. Maybe it will help me figure out what's going on. Last night, something really strange happened in the morgue. My name is Todd Reether. I work at the Campbell City Forensics Morgue. I've been there for about 12 years. It's an old brick building, but we're one of the few morgues with both the cold storage and the autopsy equipment. My official title here is anatomical pathology technologist. Basically, that's fancy for the guy who cleans the bodies. It's not the best work, but it's a living. Best I can do with my degree. I suppose, anyway, there's me, then there's Jane. She's a doctor about my age, and she's the medical examiner who actually does the autopsies. I watch her a lot when she works. It's pretty interesting to see how some of the people died. The officer who works there is Brent Nielsen. He's a stocky guy in his early 20s, nice kid. I guess he got suckered into transferring from the PD, and you can tell he's really uncomfortable here around all the bodies. After a while, I've gotten used to it. Anyway, he checks all the bodies in and out of the morgue and sends the official report back to PD. Then there's Crane. That's his last name. I don't even know his first name, and he wouldn't tell me when I asked him. God, this guy's creepy. He's got to be 80-something, but he's newer here than Brent is. He looks like he should be doing the we should be doing the autopsies on him. He's so sickly and bony and covered with liver spots. He smells like he hasn't showered in weeks either. He walks around with a cane that makes a loud clanking sound whenever it connects with the floor. It would annoy the hell out of me if he didn't hang it on the gurney whenever he wheeled the bodies in. Yeah, that's his job. He transports the bodies from the hospital to our office, and since he supposedly works out of the hospital, I don't have to see him too much. Anyway, this is what happened last night. It was about 11 p.m. I was the only one in the office. Jane went home at 9, like she always does, and Brett had to respond to a call in the area since apparently the rest of the police were away at other ends of the city. I was cleaning up around the fridges and equipment when I heard the front door at the end of the long hallway creak open, followed by the familiar clanking sound of Crane's cane. Odd, since we never usually get deliveries this late. A few seconds later, he stepped into the main room where it was. Without looking at me, he grabbed an empty gurney from the corner and headed back outside. I heard a door slam, and then the gurney being wheeled down the hall. Crane entered the room again with the gurney and a body in a blue body bag. Strange. We never use blue body bags. I guess that's the hospital. Must have switched over or something. Crane left the gurney by the door, put the clipboard in the hospital's presumed cause of death on the table, and limped back out of the hallway without so much as a glance my way, which didn't bother me too much. The guy scares the crap out of me anyway. I waited until I heard the van's engine turn over and then walked to the body bag. I picked up the clipboard and glanced at the ER doctor's comments. Lacerations, removal of hands at the wrist, severe blood loss. This was going to be messy. What happened next shocked me more than anything I'd ever seen in my 12 years here. I put my hand on the zipper of the body bag, and all of a sudden, the body within began to violently convulse on the gurney. Instinctively, I stumbled backwards, knocking over a table full of scalpels and clamps. My brain snapped back into reality. That person is alive. I have to get them out. I reached again for the zipper and pulled. Nothing. There was no visible obstruction, but the zipper was stuck shut. The body was still careening around the gurney, making it hard to grip the zipper. I regained my grasp and gave it another sharp tug. The zipper wouldn't give. Then, almost as quickly as it had started, the body stopped convulsing, lying perfectly still on the gurney. I yanked at the zipper and it immediately gave and went open. Thoughts raced through my mind. It must have been some residual electrical impulse in the brain that caused the seizure. It had to be, because this was definitely a dead body. The next thought was that the hospital sent the wrong clipboard or the wrong body. One of the two, because the clipboard said lacerations and the body didn't have scratches on it. I'm still shaking as I write. After what happened, I put the body in the fridge, dropped the clipboard on Jane's desk, and went home. I'm going to talk to her about this tomorrow. June 7th, 1984. Talk to Jane today. Jesus, something really strange is going on here. I have to be losing it. There's no other explanation. I told Jane everything that had happened last night. She agreed with my theory that there was probably still some electricity in the brain that caused the seizure. Then I told her about the lack of lacerations on the body and what the ER doctor had wrote. And she gave me a puzzled look. Todd? She held up the clipboard, and I looked again at the comments. Look what it says. Industrial accident. Apparently it's asphyxiation as a result of a crushed larynx. I couldn't freaking believe it. I told Jane again and again that the paper said last night, but I don't think she believed me. She did the autopsy later in the day and confirmed the crushed larynx. I left early tonight. On my way out, I saw the body as Jane put it back in the fridge. It was in a black body bag. June 8th, 1984. Called in sick today. Called the hospital. Talked to the ER doctor on duty 2 nights ago. He said it was a crushed larynx, and that's what he wrote. The hospital doesn't use blue body bags. June 9th, 1994. No, I can't believe this is happening. I'm literally shivering with fear. I haven't stopped vomiting all night. I have to find Crane. Something is going on. I have to find Crane. I don't know what to do. Let me back up. I went into work today, convincing myself that all of this was in my head. Jane wasn't in. She didn't call in sick, so Brett and I had no idea where she was. Later in the day, Brent went out to grab some dinner. That's when Crane showed up. I heard the cane, the gurney. All of it is a blur until he wheeled the gurney back in and something caught my eye. A blue body bag. Crane, I shouted. By the time I rounded the corner in the hallway to confront him, he had disappeared. How the hell can an old guy move that fast? I looked back to the gurney. The clipboard was lying on the table next to it, and I reached to pick it up. I looked more closely, this time at the comments to make sure that I read them right. Severe blunt force trauma. Caved skull resulting in massive cranial bleeding. I placed the clipboard back on the table and hesitantly reached for the zipper on the bag. Shit! I never jumped so high in my life. As if it was taunting me, the body bag began to violently convulse. After the initial shock, I went straight for the zipper. There was no way this was a coincidence. The zipper again was stuck. God, this is like a horrifying movie playing over and over in my head. I didn't try to mess with the zipper. Somehow I knew it would do no good. I quickly grabbed a scalpel off the tool table and went for the body bag itself. As soon as the scalpel pierced the bag, the body shivered and fell still. There was no use cutting the bag any further. I knew the zipper would work now. I slowly pulled the zipper back, and what I saw made me vomit for the first time of many times tonight. It was Jane. Her lifeless eyes seemed to stare at me from within the bag. Crying, I began to unzip the bag more. Several long gashes ran down the length of her body, and the blood dripped from her arms and legs. Her hands were missing, and her feet were contorted into a sort of sickly knot. I have seen car accident victims, people murdered with chainsaws, but nothing this horrible, and never anyone I knew. Immediately, my thoughts flew back to the clipboard from 3 nights ago. This was the exact cause of death that was written on there. This had to be some sort of a sick joke, I thought, but there is no way. This is all too real. Somehow I knew that if anyone looked at the clipboard later, it would say lacerations and blood loss. I sat in the corner and sobbed for a good 20 minutes. I tried to compose myself enough to call the police, and I managed to squeak my words through. We got on the line with the hospital, and the ER doctor confirmed that a body had been brought in that was apparently mauled by a dog. But they were unable to identify it since the hands were missing. The police tried to console me and assure me that they would give the matter their fullest attention. I told them that suspected Crane had something to do with it. They promised to bring Crane in for questioning as soon as they could find him. A temporary replacement medical examiner would be sent in from the hospital until the city hired a new one. I thanked them and hung up. I slid Jane's body into the fridge and shut the door. Kind of ironic that Jane would be the one to have an autopsy performed on, and in this office too. I can't stop crying. June 10th, 1984. Too many unsettling things today. It's time to take matters into my own hands. Bring my journal with me. Police don't trust me. Maybe I'm going crazy. I'm finding Crane myself. Made a lot of calls and visits today. Took off work. Called the hospital. Asked who brought the 2 bodies in that had ended up at our office in the ER. Crane did. Went to the morgue when I knew Brent was out. The replacement doctor isn't due until tomorrow. The morgue was closed, but I brought my key. I checked the fridge that Jane was in. Her body bag was still blue. I went to the table where I left the clipboard. Cause of death was still blunt force trauma. I looked at the name on top, Brett Nilsson. I was too desensitized to panic. I called the police, told them to keep an eye on Brent. They said they don't have the manpower for that, and to stop calling unless I have an emergency. I'm going to find Brent and save him. I'm going to find Crane and kill him. June 11th, 1984, I found Brett. I went to the morgue this morning to meet the replacement doctor. She wasn't there yet, and I didn't see Brett. I walked over to the table where I again left the clipboard. Lacerations. The clipboard had changed. I knew it would. I went to the fridge where I put Jane and opened the door. Her body bag was black. That's when I heard it, a dripping sound coming from the closet in the hallway. I opened the door, and even in my lucid insanity, what I saw made me vomit the contents of my empty stomach all over the floor. Brett was dead. His head was crushed like a rotten apple, blood splattering crimson into the white uniform. He was slumped face first against the wall, with a large lead pipe impaled through his back and into the wall, effectively holding him in place. I wasted no time in calling the police. I'm waiting for them to get here. I'm home now. The police brought me in for questioning since I put in that call yesterday about keeping an eye on Brett. I almost shouted at them to find Crane. Find Crane. Find Crane. They said they were doing all they could, but Crane hasn't shown up to work since the night he brought in Jane's body. They sent me home and told me to let them know if I was planning on going anywhere. June 12th, 1984. I woke up in the middle of the night to a small weight on my chest. I rubbed my eyes, reached down, and grabbed whatever it was that was on top of me. It was a clipboard. I hurriedly sat up and flicked on the lights. An ER doctor's report was attached to the clipboard. Third-degree burns across 90% of the body, presumably accidental disembowelment. 13 compound fractures. I looked at the name at the top of the clipboard and my entire body went cold. Todd Reether. I'm going to die. There are no further diary entries. Medical records from late June of 1984 indicate that Todd Reether was pronounced dead the morning after writing the last journal entry. The apparent cause of death were the same as those which he indicated here on the clipboard. Police records from the same time do not report anyone with the surname Crane ever being taken into custody. The clipboard that Reether reported seeing and reading was never found. So let's take a quick station identification and we'll be back for our last story. Let's see what's going on in the comments real quick. Hi, Mikey. How are you? How does someone accidentally be disemboweled? I have no idea. This is X. She has no name. Yes, this is how the zombie apocalypse starts. Hi, Maud. Yes, a fancy body cleaner. All right, we're going to get to our last story. This is called The Egg. It was a car accident. Nothing particularly remarkable, but fatal nonetheless. You left behind a wife and 2 children. It was a painless death. The EMTs tried their best to save you, but to no avail. Your body was utterly shattered. You were better off, trust me. And that's when you met me? What? What happened? You asked. Where am I? You died, I said, matter of factly. No point mincing words. There was a truck, and it was skidding. Yep, I said. I died? Yep, but you didn't feel bad about it. Everyone dies, I said. You looked around and there was nothingness, just you and me. What is this place, you asked? Is this the afterlife? More or less, I said. Are you God? You asked. Yep, I replied. I'm God. My kids, my wife, you said. What about them? Will they be all right? That's what I like to see, I said. You just died, and your main concern is for your family. That's good stuff right there. You looked at me with fascination. To you, I didn't look like God. I just looked like some man, some vague authority figure, more of a grammar school teacher than the Almighty. Don't worry, I said. They'll be fine. Your kids will remember you as perfect in every way. They didn't have time to grow contempt for you yet. Your wife will cry on the outside, but will be secretly relieved. To be fair, your marriage was falling apart. If it's any consolation, she feels very guilty for feeling relieved. Oh, I said. Oh, you said. So what happens now? Do I go to heaven or hell or something? Neither, I said. You'll be reincarnated. Ah, you said. So the Hindus were right. All religions are right in their own way, I said. Walk with me. You followed along as we strolled into the void. Where are we going? Nowhere in particular, I said. It's just nice to walk and talk. So what's the point then, you asked? When I get reborn, I'll just be a blank slate, right? A baby? So all my experiences and everything I did in this life won't matter. Not so, I said. You have within you all the knowledge and experience of all your past lives. You just don't remember them right now. I stopped walking and took you by the shoulder. Your soul is more magnificent, beautiful, and gigantic than you can possibly imagine. A human mind can only contain a tiny fraction of what you are. It's like sticking your finger in a glass of water to see if it's hot or cold. You put a tiny part of yourself in the vessel, and when you bring it back out, you've gained all the experience it had. You've been a human for at least 34 years, so you haven't stretched out yet and felt the rest of your immense consciousness. If we hung out here for longer, you'd start remembering everything. But there's no point doing that between each life. How many times have I been reincarnated? Oh, lots and lots, and into lots of different lives, I said. This time around, you'll be a Chinese peasant girl in the year 540 AD. Wait, what? You stammered? You're sending me back in time? Well, I guess technically, time as you know it only exists in your universe. Things are different where I come from. Where do you come from? You pondered. Oh, sure, I explained. I come from somewhere else, and there are others like me. I know you'll want to know what it's like there, but you honestly wouldn't understand. Oh, you said, a little let down. But wait, if I get reincarnated to other places in time, could I have interacted with myself at some point? Sure, it happens all the time. And with both lives only aware of their own time span, you don't even know it's happening. So what's the point of it all? Seriously, I asked. Seriously? You're asking me for the meaning of life? Isn't that a little stereotypical? Well, it's a reasonable question, you persisted. I looked into your eyes. The meaning of life, the reason I made this whole universe is for you to mature. You mean mankind? You want us to mature? No, just you. I made this whole universe for you. With each new life, you grow and mature, and each become a larger and greater intellect. Just me? What about everyone else? There is no one else, I said. In this universe, there's only you and me. You stared blankly at me. But all the people on earth? All you. Different incarnations of you. Wait, I'm everyone? Now you're getting it, I said, with a congratulatory slap on the back. I'm every human who ever lived or who will ever live, yes. I'm Abraham Lincoln and you're John Wilkes Booth, too, I added. I'm Hitler, you said, appalled, and you're the millions he killed. I'm Jesus, and you're everyone who followed him. You fell silent. Every time you victimize someone, I said, you were victimizing yourself. Every act of kindness you've done to yourself. Every happy and sad moment, every experience by any human was or will be experienced by you. Why, you ask me? Why do all this? Because someday you will become like me. Because that's what you are. You are one of my kind. You are my child. Whoa, you said incredulously. You mean I'm a god? No, not yet. You're a fetus. You're still growing. Once you've lived every human life throughout all time, you will have grown enough to be born. So the whole universe, you say, it's just an egg of sorts, I answered. Now it's time for you to move to your next life. And with that, I send you on your way. Good night, everybody.
I don't know, set the world higher. I don't want a baby in my heart.